We hope you enjoyed this bit of entertainment. Please like and subscribe. Tell us what you like most in the comments. Ron Prentice always thought of himself as a no-nonsense kind of guy. At 52, with 20 years in security under his belt, he'd seen his fair share of late-night oddities. Drifters sneaking onto properties, shadowy shapes that turned out to be stray cats, and strange noises that were just the groans of old machinery settling into the night. His job as the night security guard at the Black Creek paper mill was routine. A little lonely, sure, but reliable work for a reliable man. The mill was a sprawling industrial skeleton of concrete and steel perched on the edge of a dark swamp in rural Louisiana. It was the kind of place that hummed with life during the day, but transformed into a shadowy labyrinth of creaks and echoes once the workers went home. Ron liked the quiet, but it was an eerie quiet, broken only by the soft slap of water against the recycling pond and the distant croak of bullfrogs. This night began like any other. Ron clocked in at 10 p.m, his flashlight strapped to his belt and a thermos of black coffee in hand. He made his usual rounds, checking the perimeter, the storage sheds and the machinery bays. Everything seemed in order, but as the hours dragged on, the air felt heavier, the darkness darker. The swamp, usually a low buzz of life, was unsettlingly silent. Around midnight, Ron heard it. A low, guttural growl that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. It came from the direction of the recycling pond, a wide, foul-smelling pool where the mill processed wastewater. He froze, his flashlight beam cutting through the night. The growl came again, louder this time, accompanied by the sound of something heavy moving through the underbrush. Probably a gator, Ron muttered to himself, though his voice wavered. The swamp was full of them, and they occasionally wandered too close to the mill. Still, this sounded off. The footsteps were too deliberate, too upright. He shook his head. "Get a grip, old man." He approached the pond cautiously, his flashlight sweeping the area. The beam caught the rippling surface of the water, then something else, a pair of glowing yellow eyes staring back at him from the edge of the pond. They blinked once, slowly, before disappearing into the darkness. "Who's there?" Ron called out, his voice firmer than he felt. He reached for the radio clipped to his belt, his thumb hovering over the button. "This is private property. You need to—" Before he could finish, the thing stepped into the beam of his flashlight. Ron's breath hitched. It stood upright, at least 7 feet tall, its body covered in slick, scaly skin that glistened like wet leather. Its elongated snout was filled with jagged teeth, and its muscular arms ended in clawed hands that flexed and curled as if itching to grab something or someone. The creature's chest rose and fell with heavy, guttural breaths, its yellow eyes locked on Ron. For a moment, neither moved. Then the thing let out a low, menacing hiss and took a step forward. Ron stumbled back, his heart pounding. He fumbled for his radio, but his hands were shaking too much to hold it steady. The creature advanced, its claws clicking against the concrete as it moved with a chilling, predatory grace. Ron turned and ran, his flashlight swinging wildly as he sprinted toward the main office. He burst through the door, slamming it shut behind him and locking it. His chest heaved as he leaned against the wall, his mind racing. What the hell had he just seen? He grabbed the landline phone on the desk and dialed 911. "This is Ron Prentice, security guard at Black Creek Paper Mill," he said, his voice trembling. "You need to send someone out here. There's something on the property, some kind of animal. It's dangerous." The dispatcher tried to calm him down, asking for details, but Ron couldn't find the words. He just kept saying, "It's not normal, it's not natural." By the time the police arrived, Ron was sitting in his car, clutching his thermos like a lifeline. Officers Stevens and Carter approached cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Mr. Prentice," Stevens said, his tone skeptical. "What seems to be the problem?" Ron opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat. How could he explain what he'd seen without sounding insane? Finally he blurted out, "There's something out there, a gator. But it's walking, upright, like a man." The officers exchanged glances. "You sure about that?" Carter asked. trying to suppress a smirk. "I'm not crazy," Ron snapped. "I know what I saw." Stevens sighed. "Look, Mr. Prentice, we'll take a look around, but if you're seeing things, maybe from stress or lack of sleep, you should consider—" Their conversation was interrupted by the crackle of their radios. "Dispatch to Unit 3, we've got an emergency call from Black Creek Paper Mill. Supervisor reports a worker was attacked and dragged into the recycling pond by an alligator walking upright." The blood drained from Stevens's face. "Say again, dispatch?" "You heard me. Get over there now." The officers didn't waste another second. They ordered Ron to stay in his car as they rushed toward the pond, their hands on their holstered weapons. Ron watched them disappear into the darkness, his stomach churning with a mix of fear and vindication. Minutes passed like hours. The swamp seemed to hold its breath, the silence broken only by the occasional crackle of the police radio. Then came the screams. Ron flinched as a gunshot echoed through the night, followed by frantic shouting. One of the officers shouted into his radio, "Backup! We need backup now! Oh God, it's coming!" The transmission cut off with a burst of static. Ron couldn't take it anymore. Against his better judgment, he grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of the car. His legs felt like lead as he crept toward the pond, the distant sound of splashing and growling growing louder with each step. When he reached the edge, the scene was chaos. Officer Carter was on the ground, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle, while Stevens fired wildly into the water. The creature was there, partially submerged but unmistakable, its glowing eyes cutting through the darkness as it dragged someone, deeper into the murky depths. Ron didn't wait to see more. He turned and ran, his flashlight forgotten as he sprinted back to the car. He jumped in, started the engine, and peeled out of the parking lot, the tires screeching as he fled the nightmare behind him. Ron didn't stop driving until he reached the police station in town. He barged in, his face pale and his hands trembling. "It's real," he told the stunned officers at the desk. "The thing I saw, it's real. It attacked them. It killed one of the workers." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. They'd heard the emergency calls from the mill, but Ron's wild-eyed panic made them question his sanity. They called for paramedics to check him out, and when he refused to calm down, they suggested taking him to the psychiatric hospital for observation. Ron didn't fight them. He didn't care if they thought he was crazy. He just wanted to get as far away from the mill as possible. Before they could transport him, another call came in from the mill supervisor. His voice was frantic. "You've got to send more officers! That thing, it's still here! It's in the water, waiting! I saw it with my own eyes!" The room fell silent. The officers who dismissed Ron as a lunatic now looked at him with a mix of fear and disbelief. The events of that night made the local news, though the official reports were vague. The missing worker was never found, and the police officers who had encountered the creature refused to speak about what they'd seen. The mill shut down indefinitely, the recycling pond cordoned off as an environmental hazard. As for Ron, he quit his job and left town, swearing he'd never set foot near Black Creek again. He didn't need anyone to believe him. He knew what he'd seen, and the nightmares were proof enough. Some nights, though, when he couldn't sleep, he'd think about the creature, the way it moved, the way it looked at him. And he'd wonder how many more of them were out there, lurking in the swamps, waiting for their chance to emerge. See you next time. Sweet dreams.